ですね。
じゃあ皆様、これでブルースカイミートアップの in 東京ボリューム3ですかね、第3回、開催したいと思います。大きな拍手をお願いします。で、前回、一番最初かな、一番最初、去年の4月に、東京でやって、2回目が、東京、大阪、前回 LINE ヤフーで、今回3回目ということで、なんかちょっとスパン短いけど、スタートしたいと思います。で、簡単な場内説明です。で、お食事は向こうの方にケータリングサービスあります。後で懇親会の時に召し上がってください。で、荷物の管理です。クロークとか置き場所はないので、ご自身で管理なさってください。こちらの方、スタッフ用の荷物なので、混ざらないようにお願いします。で、お手洗いの位置なんですけど、会場出ていただいて、廊下の方、男性のトイレはそのまままっすぐ行ったとこ、女性のトイレは、多分どっちですかね、そのまま曲がって向こうの奥の方ですか、はい、そちらの方にあります。で、あと、今日ケータリングとかのゴミの処分なのですが、あちらのケータリングのところにゴミ箱あります。そこに入れてください。で、その他何か説明あります？大丈夫ですか？はい、ありがとうございます。で、次、ステッカーの説明です。今回、アチブメントステッカー用意してます。で、これ、参加された皆様に渡すものではなくて、ミッションをこなされた方にお渡しするようになっています。で、ステッカーなんですが、皆様の手元に名札渡してまして、こちらに多分今9枚ぐらいかな入ってると思います。で、このステッカーを集めると、アチブメントのステッカーがもらえるようになっています。で、3枚集めると、このブルースカイちゃんのステッカー、丸いステッカーがもらえます。で、9枚集めると、キラキラのビックリマンチョコみたいなステッカーがもらえます。で、このステッカーどうやって集めるかなんですけど、自分が持っているのを今度別の人も同じように持っています。で、その人と会話してください。あとでコミュニケーション取ってください。歓談の時間です。で、コミュニケーション取ったその相手の方とステッカーを交換して、こんな札上からで構いません。そのまんま貼っていただいて、で、ステッカーを交換して、アチブメントを貯めてください。で、先ほど言ったように3枚、9枚それぞれでステッカーの、交換があります。で、ちなみに今日ステッカーなんですけど、交換足りなくなったら受付の方で補充できます。交換も受付の方でできます。で、たまったステッカー、今日、そうですね、他のイベントとかでもなんですけど、大体20から30ぐらいの中で、25枚ぐらいとか結構集められる方いるんですけど、一番多かった方にいいことがあるかもしれないです。かもしれないです。なので、頑張って集めてください。で、今日最後までいるときに、終わりのタイミングで、枚数多い人、何枚ですかっていうのを聞きますので、ぜひなんか自分が一番集めたぞって人はその時に挙手してください。じゃあ続きまして、スポンサーのご紹介です。で、今日スポンサーでケータリングのサービスと一部提供していただいてます。四谷ラボの運営も携わってらっしゃる全力機械株式会社さんよりいただいてます。で、実は書いてはいないんですけど、ケータリングの方、もう少し、お手伝いいただいてます。今回、会場を提供してくださっているアドビさんの方からも、ケータリングサービスということで、いただいてます。
飲み物もです。後で飲みましょう。
そう、注意で忘れてました。奥の方に冷蔵庫ありまして、で、アルコール等の提供が今日あります。ただ、自己管理で飲み過ぎないように、ちゃんと安全に帰れるように、週末なので、無事に帰れるように、土日ちゃんと過ごせるように、節度のある範囲内でお願いします。はい、次です。ブルースカイチームよりまずビデオメッセージ預かっています。で、このメッセージの方を今から再生したいと思います。
Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Frazee. I'm the CTO at Bluesky. I've been with Bluesky from the very beginning. I helped co-design the app protocol, and I built the original Bluesky application, which everybody still uses today. I just wanted to record a quick message saying hello to all of you, and thank you all so much for your support. It's a really exciting time for Bluesky. We just passed 10 million users, which we're all very happy about. And Japan has been a part of that from the very beginning. Y'all are one of our biggest communities. Very first meetup happened in Japan. And there's a lot of really great applications getting built in Japan. Bluecast, I hear, just recently licensed karaoke music, which is really fun. There's Tokimeki and Ucho10 and many other really great projects. So we're really happy to be getting to spend a little bit more time with you and to see that these meetups are still happening in Japan. If you're enjoying Bluesky, don't forget to tell your friends, build your community even further. And if you have any feedback for us, don't hesitate to get in touch, send an email. We're keen to hear anything you want to tell us. So have a really good time at your meetup, and I'll see you online.
はい、ありがとうございました。ちょっと音声の方小さかったので、後でメッセージの部分は YouTube で上げられるかなと思います。YouTube の方に上げたいと思います。またメッセージでお知らせします。で今回スペシャルゲストとして来てくださっています。ブルースカイのコアメンバーのところでダンさんになります。まだプレゼンじゃん。で、ダンさん、簡単に、説明しますと、リアクトとレダックスの開発メンバーで、今、ブルースカイに所属していて、クライアントアプリケーションの開発に携わっています。で、ここからダンさんのキーノート、今回のメインセッションとなります。
Presentation? Your presentation, please. Yeah. Can you hear us? Do I just need to speak loudly? That'll be great. Thank you. Yeah, I can have you do it. Hi. Working fantastic. Yes. Well, we haven't gotten to the technical stuff yet, so we don't know.
So I wanted to do a talk about it, and so this is that talk. But first I want to talk a little bit about the app. So as you probably know, Bluesky, there are many ways to describe it. I guess like one of the simplest way to describe it is it's kind of like an open source Twitter. So it's a product that looks a lot like Twitter. It is, it has a lot of elements similar to Twitter. It has this, you can post there. But it also has some unique aspects that kind of make it different from a lot of social media apps. And so I want to emphasize a couple of aspects. One is that Bluesky handles are just domain names. And so this is pretty unusual. I've never seen this done before. I thought this was really cool when I first found out about Bluesky, is that, of course, when you register, you get a username like your username.bsky.social, but actually it's
And there, sorry, your
Mhm.
mic is not on.
Oh.
I'm talking about the, yeah.
the main.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay.
This is for the broadcasting. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
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 Sorry to everyone who missed what I was saying. But I was just saying that. So I'm first going to talk a little bit about the app and some things that set Bluesky apart from different social media apps I've seen before. And so the first thing that's kind of different is that Bluesky usernames are really just domains. And again, you when you just register, you gain you get a my username.bsky.social. But if you have already, for example, if you have a website, you can with your own domain, you can use that as your username. So for example, there's WashingtonPost.com, the newspaper. So their Bluesky handle is just WashingtonPost.com. And I actually bought my first domain, denabra.mov, because denabra.mov, you can get .mov domains now. So I bought it after I joined Bluesky because I never really had a personal website, but I thought, well, why not? And so now I also have a single page that just has a couple of links. But that, like people from, I guess, like younger generation don't necessarily have experience setting up personal websites. This was kind of like an interesting callback to the past. But it also kind of made sense because, a domain is kind of your internet username, and you can just carry it forward. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Another aspect of Bluesky that I thought was unusual is that anybody can make a custom algorithm. Just like, on Twitter, you can have like for you and following, and on TikTok or Threads, like usually there's just two choices. On Bluesky, any developer can make their own algorithm called custom feed, and then serve it from their own server. And so that seemed very unusual to me, to have a social media product with this kind of deep extensibility that developers can plug into. I've never seen that before. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And these two different aspects, like domains as usernames and then custom algorithms, they're really a reflection of this product being built in a fundamentally different way than other social media products that have existed before. And that is because it's built on this protocol, the atproto that I'm going to be talking about. And so, yeah, this is now we're going to talk a little bit about the protocol and what it is. And so the title of this talk is Web Without Walls. It's, I guess, like it's a talk about a few different things. I actually found it hard to pin down like what specifically I want to talk about. I guess like one thing is it's about the relationship between the user and the product, and like the user, the product, and the developer, and what kind of relationship do we have. It's also talk about the shape of the web and the shape of social media, and if we have any agency to kind of change that shape and maybe change our relationship and see what kind of opportunities that this can lead to. And so I want to start with kind of going back in time a little bit and talking about the early web, but also just about the way the web works. Like the primitive of the web is a website. You want to put something on the web, like if you want to put something on the web, like how do you do it? Usually you have to create a bunch of HTML pages and you put them on some website. So at this point, the relationship between you and the content you create is very simple. It's just, here's a bunch of pages that I made, right? But then they start their life on my computer. So if I want somebody else to access those pages, I need to put them somewhere. And so I need to put them on the website. So, okay, what's a website? Well, these pages need to live on some kind of a box, right? Like we need to put them somewhere on some other computer. Maybe this is a server that I'm renting from some company. Maybe this is my own server. If you're kind of technically inclined, you can have your internet provider dedicate to a static IP and literally serve your website from your home. But probably you're not going to do it. Probably you're going to use some company services to do that. But as soon as you have some place where you put your HTML files, the next thing you want to do is to give them a name. You want to have some kind of address that people can discover, people can share, that people can visit from their browser. And so that's what a domain is. The domain is like an internet address that lets people find that box where your stuff lives. And maybe initially you might want to, again, use a free service, right? So there are, for example, on GitHub, if I create a repository, I get a free domain under GitHub. Maybe I can, I can buy my own domain if I want to. But there is a very clear relationship in this kind of, this early style of the web where I created something, I have a domain, an address that I own, and I put my stuff there, and it's obviously owned by me and kind of controlled by me. And then if I want to change the domain, I can just do that, right? I can buy a new domain, I can point that domain to my site. If people know that Dan Abramov is kind of my brand, my domain, they know that whatever I put there is something that I made. And then, I mentioned that I need to put it into some box, but really that box doesn't really matter that much, because if I don't trust my hosting, if my hosting is flaky, if it goes down, if it starts serving ads on my, like if it starts messing with the stuff that I created and I wanted to put on the web, I can just get a new box, right? I can just get a new hosting service. I can just copy and paste my files to that, to the different hosting service, and then I can point my domain at that new box. So I can just say now this is my hosting provider, and so I'm really not tied to a particular hosting provider or a particular domain. And so this entire thing is kind of still within my direct control, all of it. And so as a somebody who controls this domain and this site, I can remove things from it. I can change them. I can add new things. I can add new pages, and it's still under my control. And this is kind of how websites worked on the early web, right? Like you would make a website, your friend would make a website, maybe you would visit each other's websites. So this is Haley, my colleague. She works at Bluesky. So she has a domain haleyok.com, and she can also put some pages there. And then one interesting thing is, again, like we talked about the boxes, and that these pages live in some boxes, some computers. But really the boxes that don't matter, because for all you know, it's possible that maybe we use the same hosting provider and actually our websites live on the same computer, but maybe we don't. And it really doesn't matter from the user's perspective, because they're not really, when you use the web, you don't really think about those boxes. You don't really think about those walls. You just think about which website you're navigating. And these pages can link to each other, right? So that's how we kind of traverse and navigate the web. We express the relationship that this link goes there, and then somebody else manages that website, and maybe they will change hosting, but it's entirely within their control. And so there's a very clear kind of sense of control here, like who controls which pieces. And then, of course, people are social creatures. We don't just want to be alone. And so on the early web, there was this notion of guest books, where you would visit somebody's website, and they would have this guest book section where you can leave some comments. That's like an early web kind of thing, where you could leave some comments. You could say like, I was here, whatever, and then you would visit your friend's website and you could leave a comment there. And so it was kind of like an early mode of social interaction on the web. But still, this is kind of like visiting each other's houses, which people do. But a lot of interaction between people actually happens in shared spaces. So for example, right now we are in a shared space. We're not at anyone's home, right? And there's a lot of us here. And there are some kind of rules, right? Like if you break some rules, you might get kicked out of it. But overall, it is kind of like a shared space that we participate in. And so, of course, people wanted to create this kind of shared social experiences on the web as well, which kind of look like this. that's kind of what we settled on. Is a lot of these shared spaces kind of end up looking like this. And so there's a question: okay, if we want to have something like this where we can leave, write posts, write comments, participate together, how does it fit into the web? How does the social network fit into these primitives of the web that we talked about earlier? And so, of course, it kind of seems like, well, that is, that's some HTML pages on some box that is under some domain that is controlled by somebody, right? And so we have this kind of exact same hierarchy as we did with personal websites, but now somebody has to control this thing. So maybe it's a social media company, right, like Facebook. And maybe there are different kinds of social spaces online with slightly different rules, different brands, different companies controlling them, slightly different formats of how we participate in them. But notice one interesting thing, which is we as people, we used to be outside the boxes. We used to be at the top. We used to be kind of the source of truth, controlling what's at the bottom. And now we're inside the box. And so that is actually, it seems like a kind of, like a philosophical thing, like, about owning your own data, but like, what does it really mean? But I'm actually talking about there are some very practical implications from us being stuck inside of these boxes that I want to talk about. And so the first thing is, that is like we used to be kind of top level. We used to be at the top, and we used to have these sites linking to each other. And now we're within these boxes, and it's fine if we, as long as we trust those entities that manage those boxes, like Facebook, Twitter, and so on. But there are some pretty concrete consequences of this type of architecture. So one thing that can happen is that some products, they just die. Of course, that's probably unlikely to happen to Facebook anytime soon. But sometimes products die. If you've been on the internet for a while, you probably have this experience of, having posted somewhere actively, and then this thing just shuts down. All your posts are gone, and yeah, like you put your time and effort into something that that wasn't permanent, that just disappeared. Another thing that can change with products is they can change, and sometimes we agree with those changes. Sometimes we don't agree with those changes. But really, as users, we don't really have a say in what happens. And sometimes they change in unrecognizable ways. And then there's not really a lot we can do about that. And in some countries, there are actually laws. So, for example, in the European Union, there's a law that says that you have to be able to export your data from any service. So, a lot of services have implemented GDPR laws, so you can download your data from it. And I actually had to do this because, so I have a Twitter account. This is my second Twitter account. So this is Dan Abramov too, because I used to have Dan Abramov account, and then it got shadow banned. So I don't know what happened. I didn't believe that shadow banning is a real thing. It turns out that it was. It just stopped showing up in the For You main algorithm. So my account started showing up only in following, but not in For You. And so I was confused for a while, and then I was like, okay, I'll just make a new one. I'll just make a second account. And so I decided to shut down my first account because I don't need it anymore. And so I downloaded all the data from my account from like 9 years of Twitter usage, just for good memories, I guess. And it took a few days. So I actually had to wait a few days. And then they emailed me this huge folder, which has a 100 megabyte JSON file with all my tweets. So this is my Twitter data. It's a 100 megabyte file. But the problem is that, honestly, this data is dead, right? This data is completely decontextualized. It is completely divorced from whatever the context of that data was, right? It's like my tweets, but they're without my friends, because my friends are still on Twitter. And what do I do with it? Like, I got this bunch of JSON. Like, do I print it out? Do I put it on the wall? Do I give it out to friends, people on the street? It's just it's dead information. And so when we see something dead, we might want to ask the question: who killed the data? Why is the data dead? Is the person who killed it in this room with us right now? Well, the thing is, as developers, we actually kill data all the time. So this is something that we do as developers. If you've been a developer for a while, you'll know what I'm talking about. For example, here's a little JavaScript function where we ask something and then we display a message. And so it has a variable called post. And when the function exits, that variable disappears, is dead, because it's ephemeral. This variable exists only for as long as we're within that function. When we exit the function, the variable disappears. And in a lot of cases, that's actually what we want. We want the data to be ephemeral if we don't want to persist it any longer. But sometimes we want the data to persist for a little bit longer, to stay with us, to stay alive. We want to keep it alive while some element of the user interface is on the screen. And then when the piece of user interface is removed, we want to kill it. And so if you're familiar with something like React or any other number of front-end libraries, they usually have this concept of component tree, where you divide your screen into areas like header, footer, sidebar, feed item, composer, just like different things that correspond to different parts of a user interface. And then you can say, I want to attach this information to this piece of user interface so that it stays alive while that piece is alive. And so in React, you do this by declaring what is called state. You can declare a piece of state, and then that piece of state persists for as long as that piece of user interface persists on the screen. So it's kind of attached to it. But then, of course, what happens if that piece of UI gets removed from the screen? Well, then, of course, the information also disappears because it's ephemeral. It's tied to this piece of UI. And in many cases, that's actually what you want. But if not, if you ever learned React, you might have heard this concept of lifting state up. So lifting state up. So this is one of the first things you learn as a React developer, is this technique for keeping data alive a bit longer. So what you do is, if you want something to persist a bit longer, you can just move it up the hierarchy and attach to something, to some piece of UI that lives for a longer period of time. And so then the data still flows downwards. So anything below can still access it. But then if some component at the bottom gets removed, that's actually fine. That doesn't destroy the data because it's attached somewhere above. And then if it gets re-added, well, it can read this information again. So we kind of persist the data for a little bit longer. Of course, our application still runs inside a browser and inside a browser tab. So the user can close the tab, and in that case, the data is, again, completely gone. And in many cases, again, this is actually what you want. So in many cases, you want some data to be ephemeral. Like maybe you're like typing something, and they're like, I don't need this anymore. You just close the tab, it's gone forever. That's actually correct. But sometimes you want some data to persist a little bit longer than that. So what can you do? Well, browsers actually provide an API called local storage. So this is a way to kind of attach the data to something that will be persisted by the browser. So next time you open the app, it's still there. So for example, this is how Bluesky keeps your login information so that you don't have to log in every time you open the tab. Although we've had some bugs around that, but hopefully not too often. But that is, if you want something to persist a bit longer, you can lift it up to the local storage. And then, if the user closes the tab, they can open a new one, and then the data can still flow down, and it's still there. Of course, all of this happens inside a computer. So what if your computer dies? Right? In that case, the data in local storage, that's also gone. Plus, also, you probably have more than one computing device. You probably have maybe a phone, a laptop, maybe you have some friends, and your friends also have some computing devices. And so for something like a blog post, you probably want your friends to see it too, right? So you want this information to be available not just on one computer and not just on your computers, but on many computers, from many people. And so you need to somehow lift state up even further. And of course, you could try to make computers talk to each other. It gets pretty complicated. And there is actually a very simple solution to this, which is you can just rent a server. You can have a server, and that's traditional web development. That's how all the websites that you access on the web, that is how they work. Is the data is lifted up to the server. That is where it lives. A server is just a special computer managed by somebody. And then any of your phones or laptops or whatever can just download the information from the server, and the server is the source of truth. Like that is where the information lives. And so if you're going to think from the perspective of a developer, that is really the last point. Like at this point, there is nowhere else to move the data. You can keep the server running essentially forever. You can have like a database that's there or just some files. You can keep it running forever. It can keep storing information as long as your product is still alive. So there's a question, what happens if your product doesn't exist anymore? And so this is actually something that you can't really fix if you think from the developer perspective, because from the developer perspective, this is where your area of responsibility ends. Because you just go home. Like your company went bust, you go home, you take another job, you don't think about it again. Or like the product has changed direction, there's like new management, whatever. it happens. But something is wrong here, because if you wear the user hat instead of the developer hat, if you start thinking as a user, that's not really right from the user perspective. The data doesn't just disappear because something you put effort into. It shouldn't just disappear because a product died. And really, it comes down to what is the source of truth for this information? What is the actual source? Like when I write my posts, what is the source of truth? Is it my computer? Is it the server? And you kind of need to step outside this developer mindset and kind of think from the user perspective is, when you create something, the actual source of truth is you. The source of truth is the user. And the shape of how products are created today doesn't reflect that reality, that we are the source of truth for our data. And that is really what the ad protocol kind of aims to solve and aims to change. And so I'm going to show a little demo of what I mean by this and how it works. So this is my Bluesky account. I'm going to post something. Hello from a meetup in Tokyo. I hope the internet still works. Yeah, cool. Okay, it works, right? So here's my post. So I just posted something. It appears on on the Bluesky website. You can see it on my profile as well. So it just seems like social media as usual. But then behind the scenes, there's something else happening. So this is a little tool that somebody in the community built that uses the ad protocol, and it lets you see things from the ad protocol perspective. So it lets you see what is actually being stored and what format is it being stored. And so here we've navigated to this URL at Dan Abramov. So this is information associated with my identity on the ad protocol. So this is my domain. Domains are just handles in Bluesky, but it's bigger than Bluesky. They're really handles in this thing we call the atmosphere. Like the thing that's above the products, atmosphere, ad protocol, kind of like wordplay. So there's this thing that's independent of specific products. It's like a layer above where we can lift state up one more time from the products, from the backend into this shared independent layer. So let's see what's happening here. So there's a few things. So we're gonna look. This is information associated with my all the stuff that I do on Bluesky and on other apps using the ad protocol. We're gonna come back to this. And here's a little bit of information about my identity. Some of it looks pretty technical, but I'll actually zoom in on a few things that I think are fairly clear. So this is my domain name. So it says this is how I'm known on the network. This is my handle. So I can change it over time. I'm not tied to one particular domain. I can change it to a different one if I want to. This is my public key. So this is a mathematical concept, but essentially it's kind of like a seal, you know, like in the old days, people used to put like seals to verify authenticity of something. So this is kind of like a similar concept in the digital world. It just verifies that I've actually created everything that lives here, all my posts and likes and other information. And the other interesting thing here is something called the service endpoint. So this is the server where my information is actually stored. And so what's interesting about this is that this server is a Bluesky server. So this is a server operated by Bluesky, but actually it doesn't have to be. So the code for the server, we distribute it as open source. So anyone can run it. Anyone can. We also distribute a Docker container with it, so anyone can, you know, run a copy of it. You can run it on your own server if you want to, and you can point your protocol record to your own server, so you don't have to depend on the Bluesky company to operate it. But you know, I just use the Bluesky server. That's kind of the default when you register with Bluesky. And so, like I said, I just made a post, so we can see there are collections here. For example, the collection of posts. I can press on it, and then here's the most recent record, and it says, you know, it's a little technical. You can see it's actually just JSON, but you can see it says here, "Hello from a meetup in Tokyo." And so that is actually when you post in Bluesky, it actually goes in this repository that's hosted by whoever is your host. And then it kind of funnels into the Bluesky application to the backend. And so that's how it works. We can take a look at somebody else's profile as well. So this is Haley's profile. We can check. Here is Haley's latest post, probably thanking somebody for reproducing an issue. So we can check HaleyOK.com. We can check Haley's profile. And we can check Haley's posts. And indeed, this is the latest post on Haley's profile. But one interesting thing is if we look at Haley's protocol records and we scroll down a little bit, we can see that service endpoint for Haley is actually her own server. So Haley runs her own server, and this is where her information is stored. And Bluesky app kind of aggregates information from different servers. So we can see there's kind of an interesting parallel between how the web works, you know, how it worked in the past, and how Bluesky kind of social media works on the app protocol. Is that in the past we used to have this, you know, identities with domains, and we put HTML files there, and that's how you found the websites. Kind of similarly, in the app protocol, we have these identities that are also you use domains as human readable ways to access them, but they keep collections of application-specific information like posts or likes. And to kind of show this how this works, I'm going to like this Haley's post. So you see I just added a like. Again, it works just like a normal web app. You don't really notice anything unusual. And there's a question. So I liked Haley's post. So whose information is it? Well, the action of liking is something that I made. It's something that it refers to Haley's post, but it's really my information because it's a like I created. So if you go to, again, if you go to Dan Abramov, to my records, you can see there are like records here. And so this is the latest like record. And you can see that, you know, it references some URI. And if I press on it, oops, if I press on it, I'm actually going, oh, wait, is this the right one? I think I just mispressed somewhere. Oh, yeah, right. I pressed twice. So if I pressed on this one, it goes to Haley's post. So Haley's post is hosted on Haley's server, and my post is hosted on Bluesky server that manages my records. And so a like is really a record on my server that links to a record on Haley's server. And so it's kind of interesting, like there is also this parallel where, on the in traditional web, we have these pages that link to each other, and somebody might delete a page and then the link would break, but essentially we just kind of point to things that we created, different people have created. And here we also kind of link to each other. Like when I like a post, it's really like a link to a record that might live somewhere else using the protocol. And so one thing you might have noticed is, you see there are these collections called @bluesky.post or like, there are Bluesky posts and likes, but I also included something called events.smokesignal.rsvp. So the interesting thing about atproto is that it's not really tied to the Bluesky app or social media at all. You can make any kinds of apps where you want to store some information, some public information for different users. For example, there is this app called Smoke Signal. It's the design is very bare bones, so it's not very pretty yet. But you can think of it similar as Meetup.com. If you've used that, it's just a place to post events and then say that I'm going to this event. And so you can log into that app with your Bluesky account. So I'm going to do that. So again, my domain is my login, because my domain is kind of my username on the web. And so I'll press login. I say I authorize this app to use this. And again, it's kind of helpful to think of my account as not just being a Bluesky account, but really an account for the whole atmosphere, for all applications on the protocol. And so let's say I want to go to this event, Dayton Junk Theater presents Shakespeare Macbeth, or maybe like, let's say I'm interested. So I'm going to press this button, and it says the RSVP has been created. So it recorded that I'm going there. But again, under the hood, I can go to my atprotocol records, and you can see in addition to the Bluesky records here, I also have event smoke signal calendar RSVP records. And so this is the latest record, and it says I'm interested in this event. And then there's a link to this event, which is an atprotocol link. And so if I visit it, I go to the server of whoever hosts this event. This is Nick. So this is the event that I just said I'm going to, and you can see that it's under Nick's account. And Nick's account is hosted on some other server. So this is the server that he is using. So you can see that it's not just about Bluesky. Developers can build other applications that can link to information from each other and from Bluesky as well. And so Bluesky is just one of those apps. And so then there's a question of, okay, so we have these, we have these repositories where information is stored. They can be hosted, and you can change where they're hosted. You have control over that. But then you have the server, like Bluesky app has the server, right? Like we want to somehow get that information from our users as a traditional kind of backend, right? Like we need to somehow be able to query it to actually implement the web app. So how does this work? How do we create something that looks like this from these individual records that live in different places? And so we actually don't have to go very far for inspiration for how to do this. If you've ever used Google in your life, when you look at Google, one interesting thing is you're using the Google website, but the Google website displays information from different other websites. So how do they do that, right? Like it's information from very different places, hosted on different servers, but it's displayed on a single page. And so the way that works is through aggregation. So Google actually crawls the web. It has special kind of machines that go around the web and index information and store it on their servers. So we just need some way to do something similar. So the Bluesky backend needs to collect information from all these different user repositories. And then it can produce a traditional social media experience. So one thing that would be inefficient is, if we have 10 million users, there's 10 million repositories. Of course, there's not necessarily 10 million servers. A lot of them are stored, like we host quite a few of those. The vast majority currently are hosted by Bluesky, so it's maybe we have like a dozen servers. I'm not sure, but still, if you have these, potentially thousands or hundreds of thousands servers, you don't want your backend to subscribe to each of them independently and try to crawl each of them, because it would be too complicated to create apps. So we actually provide a node we call the relay that acts as a cache for the entire network. So we provide something called relay that aggregates. Whenever you post something, it goes into the relay, and then it goes into the Bluesky app. And so other apps can subscribe to that relay as well. And so this is an optimization so that it's actually fast. And from that point on, it's just traditional server-client architecture. So it's just a normal, when you build with atproto, you just build in a normal web app where you have a server and you have some client computers, and then they talk in their usual ways. It's just that behind the server, there is this shared layer that is user-controlled. So that was a lot. So let's just recap the entire thing. So in the early days, people used to have websites. You can still do that if you want to. But people would put their pages there, and there was a direct relationship between things you created and your identity. But that relationship got washed out as we wanted internet to be more social, and so people started gathering the social spaces, and the spaces were shaped, like if we try to shoehorn them into the shape of the web, we end up with decentralized platforms. And it works fine until they might die or they may change their direction, and as users we have no control over that. And of course, we can export our data if we don't agree with the direction, but then this data is dead because we can't really do anything meaningful with it. It's completely detached from where it lived. But what if we had another layer on top of the internet that's independent from the products, that kind of lives above the products, where that is shaped similar to the web, where we can still put our information in application-specific formats like Bluesky posts or likes or smoke signal RSVPs and so on. And these records in these repositories that are user-controlled can link to each other. And that's how we represent relationships between things and between different products. And in order to make that scalable, we want to aggregate this in our backends. So our backends become aggregators. And that's how we can create these traditional social media experiences where things appear aggregated and we see, all information together at the same time. And then to scale it up and to actually make it feasible to create apps this way, we want to have some kind of caching and some kind of nodes that crawl the network and then make it very easy for applications to query the current state of the network and to make it efficient. And so we have our own relay, but our relay is also open source, so somebody else could also run their own relay if they want to. With the current load on the network, it would cost you about $150 to run your own relay, indexing the entire network as it happens. So it's actually it's pretty cost effective if you wanted to do that yourself, but you can also use ours. And from that point on, it's just a traditional server client architecture, nothing novel. So there's a twist, which is, Bluesky is just one of those apps that can be built on the atmosphere. And people are just starting to play with it. It's a new concept. It's very early. It's not very polished. But again, like I've showed this, smoke signal app that is kind of like a Meetup.com kind of thing. There's also something called Front Page, which I'll just show very briefly. This is, if you're familiar with something like Hacker News, it's just a link aggregator. So there's literally it has a front page, so you can vote on things. I just upvoted something, and again, because I upvoted something, it will appear if I go to my profile, and it's represented as a vote record for front page. So this is this record that I just upvoted. So there are other applications you can build this way, and we want people to kind of start playing with this idea and start building applications. And one crucial part is that every record that gets created, because all the data is public, goes to all applications that subscribe to the relay, not just the application that produced it. So what does it mean? So this is what I was getting into with the changing the relationship between the user and the product. This actually unlocks some new opportunities. So first, I just kind of want to show. So for example, you've seen when I create a post, it first goes to my repository in the protocol. So it travels to the relay so that it can be retransmitted to all the applications listening to the relay. But then something interesting happens. So it actually goes to all the applications. So you can imagine when it goes to, for example, the front page app on the right, the front page app doesn't care about Bluesky posts at all. It doesn't, it doesn't do anything with Bluesky posts. It's unrelated to Bluesky. So you can just ignore that record and not care about it. Then the Bluesky app in the middle, it obviously cares about the Bluesky posts. It wants to index them. So it just stores it into the database on the Bluesky backend. And then the smoke signal app, maybe currently it doesn't care about Bluesky posts and it could just ignore them. But in the future, you could imagine that maybe they want to make an event discussion page where they could collect all Bluesky posts that link to this event and make it kind of like a comment section for the event, right? Or kind of like a feed for the event. And so in that case, they would want to store it in the database so that they can do that. So you can see there's this kind of new possibilities for what you can do with as a product developer. So for example, one thing you can do is you can bootstrap an app on top of information from another app. So you can imagine if you want to make a dating website, for example, one of the challenges of making a new social product is you have to convince everybody to input their information one more time there, like create a profile, like put your avatar there, fill in some info, like follow people and so on. But in this case, you can imagine if you're making a new product, you can just bootstrap it on top of, for example, Bluesky for now, right? So you can query the Bluesky records that exist, and you can make it so that when I log into the app, my profile is already filled in. And you can decide how much of the information that exists in the network you actually want to use. It's like maybe you just want to use the profile picture, but not anything else. Maybe you want to use the follow graph, so you can pre-fill like who follows whom. From that point on, like maybe you want to keep it synchronized with Bluesky follows, or maybe you want to have your own concept of follows that's completely unrelated to Bluesky. So it's really something that you have control over. Just like companies like Meta, when they launched Threads, Threads was using the Instagram's follow graph. But of course, only Threads can do this. You can't launch your own Threads and then have it use the Instagram's follow graph because Instagram wouldn't give you this information. Whereas here, the information already lives there by default. So you can actually make your own products that use it. You can also build plugins for other products without kind of asking permission from those products. You only need permission from the user. So, like in the early days of Twitter, there used to be all these tools like unsubscribe from inactive followers, or just like different ways to see your timeline and kind of like experiments with different social, modes of interaction. And a lot of them have really kind of disappeared because Twitter has closed down the API or like made it too expensive or just kept fiddling with it. But here, Bluesky is just one of the consumers of that general API. So you don't really need to ask permission from Bluesky to be able to do that. So that's why there are already tools for Bluesky that let you like unfollow people or do other interesting things. So you can build products that are kind of just like plugins for existing products or complementing them in some ways. And I think the last interesting thing is you can also, the boundaries between products kind of start to blur because products can link and like reference information from other products and complement it. And so one way you can imagine this is imagine somebody was to make and Instagram, something like an Instagram clone using that protocol. So in that case, you can imagine that they would be able to first bootstrap on top of Bluesky social graph, but maybe they don't want their posts to go to Bluesky. Maybe initially it's a completely different app. It has its own timeline. You're posting your posts in a different format there, and it's a completely separate app. But maybe with time it becomes very popular, and then maybe Bluesky users would want to show some information from that app. And so Bluesky could actually make a choice to add a tab to profile, change the media tab to show posts from that app, because all the information goes to all the apps. So all apps can actually interpret it. So this really opens up for, similar how the web is has this concept of links, and you can embed things inside of other things. It kind of opens the same for products in general and for apps to kind of erase the boundaries between them and have the developers figure out how much they want to collaborate, depending on what the users want. And then if the users don't like the choices made by some product, then somebody else can make a different product, and they don't have to convince everyone to move over because the information is already there. And so they can kind of make choices about how to interpret that information. So if that got you curious, we actually revamped our website at atproto.com. So if you're curious about the non-Bluesky, things that are not related to Bluesky but just the protocol, there is a new tutorial there for building a very simple app on top of that protocol. So check out that tutorial. It's also on GitHub. So there's a link to it on the website. Give it a star at atproto.com. There's also a community-run site called atprotocol.dev. So this is a community-run site with some talks about that protocol. So they're currently on Zoom. There's like 10 or 15 people attending each of these. So maybe there will be a few more. But just if you're interested in the protocol, kind of keep track of that, what's happening there. And also here's a starter pack on Bluesky with people who are posting about a protocol or building that protocol or on top of that protocol. So you can check that out and follow a bunch of people there. There's a bunch of questions I'm not going into today. That's not because we don't have any answers. It's just because it's already a really long talk. So not today. But yeah, so I wanted to finish with one closing thought, which is, well, what happens if Bluesky dies, right? Most new ideas don't really gain traction. Most new products fail. Most new companies fail. So that is the most likely statistical outcome, is that we just go bust. And I think the answer is kind of interesting because, all this information, sure, Bluesky would not be hosting it. But if I download it, I have the archive, I can just put it on my personal server that I manage, that I can rent. It's there can be people pull in to do that. It's extremely cheap to host. So it's I can just put all those records back up, and because they're cryptographically signed, it's actually you don't need to trust any particular kind of place that's serving them. You can verify that they have the same identity, that it's actually they were created by me. And then, of course, the relay that we run that retransmits all the information, if Bluesky goes down, that relay would go down too. But the relay is open source. And so as long as there are some apps, we don't know what, those may be completely different apps than exist today, but as long as some developers are interested in this way of building, they can get the relay back up and running because it's open source. And because it's actually way cheaper to run as well if there's less kind of usage. So initially there are incentives to keep it running. And then the funny thing is that at some point somebody can even resurrect Bluesky because the Bluesky code is open source. And so if you got the entire thing running, you might as well get the app running again and then have it index whichever identities are still online in the network. And so maybe it will have a different name, but you can still use the information that exists there as long as it's up, as somebody has it cached. And so really it kind of doesn't matter because, you can kill a company, you can kill a product, but you can't really kill an idea. And, life finds a way. So that's the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your fantastic presentation. And we are going to take some Q&As from the audience. But before doing that, can I give that guy a shout out about this fantastic simultaneous?
Oh, it's working nicely?
Yeah. 今日はその自動通訳を自分たちが用意しているシステムでやろうと思ったんですけど、直前に使えなくなりました。そしたら彼があっちにいる彼が自分たちは同時通訳のツールを作ってます。使いますかって言ってオファーしてくれてうまくいきました。なので彼に拍手を。Thank you very much for a fantastic simultaneous interpretation tool. Thank you very much. And now let me take some questions from the audience. 質問があればどうぞ。マイクを回していきます。
大体5分ぐらいでお願いします。
全員
で5分ぐらい。
Thanks for the talk. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the talk. It was quite interesting. It was the first time for me to learn about the atproto. So my question is about their snapshots of data. Let's say like you say something controversy on the Bluesky and you deleted it, but some other people liked your post already, then they might have that footprint in their own atproto persona. So is there any way to completely remove data from like somewhere at this protocol for personal information perspective?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess like I think it kind of goes into questions of what is a good behaved client, because for example there is a first class operation of deleting. So you can delete a specific post. You can delete like a record, essentially. Like you can delete any record in your repository according to these commands. But then somebody who is listening, it's possible for somebody to run we call them app views, so these backends that would not respect your deletion request. But then it gets into like a similar thing as like somebody could screenshot your post, or somebody could, like if it's something like Twitter, somebody could like just periodically scrape content really aggressively. And so kind of like if somebody is really determined to snapshot everything you do, it's kind of similar between like atproto and the web, but atproto is a little bit more like scraper friendly. So it really depends on network conventions of, maybe there's like legislation, in that case, you can go after somebody who's keeping the copy of your data and so on. But like the only thing we can really do at the network level is we can broadcast the command to deletion. And also if it's like something really bad that like we don't want on the network, we can block it on the network layer and like on the relay itself. And then like, of course, if somebody else runs a relay with different views on like censorship, for example, like in different countries that have completely different sense of like what's permissible, they might want to run their own relays with like different kind of mechanisms. So I think like in a lot of ways, this kind of falls back on these social conventions that already exist in the real world. And then the technical aspect is just that we will broadcast the deletion to any well-behaved app views that will respect it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. あれちゃんと動いてたと思うんで、ちょっとこのままいっちゃいます。もし気になる人は後で僕に聞きに来てください。Any other questions? 他にありますか？スタッフからないですか？訳すこともできます。
Thank you for presentation. Sometimes I want to hide my information. For example, like protected account on Twitter. So I have a question on how to hide or protect my information or post. I think that all the data we can see the all data on the via AT protocol. So how?
Yeah. So the question is what is the equivalent to protected account?
Yes.
So currently, like at this moment, all the information that lives in the protocol repositories is public information. So we kind of focused on that use case first, and we're working on extending the protocol to handle private information, but this is slightly different from what you're describing. The extension that we're thinking of is it kind of fits in the model where you would have some records that can be they kind of live in special collections that are not revealed to arbitrary apps. And then apps would have to request permission to access this information, and then it will be shared selectively with those specific apps instead of being sent like to everyone through the relay. And so we would use this for things like like preferences. Like preferences already kind of work this way, but it's hard coded for Bluesky, so it would be like a more general system. And so I don't think we will have exact analog of protected accounts. The way it works on Twitter is kind of that you can have your account be completely open at first, right? And then you can lock it later, and so things kind of disappear, but they're somebody could have copies of them, of course, and so on. Then they reappear. It's likely that, and it's with that protocol, it doesn't really make sense to change kind of the type of things after they have been created. So what's more likely is that we would have some kind of primitive for posts or something like posts that go out to like a selected audience, maybe something like closer to Twitter circles or something like this. But again, it's like an active area of research. We're not exactly sure how it will work. But I think the constraint that we will follow is that it would be a slightly different kind of thing, right? Because like this post would not show up in feeds, for example. So there's just like a whole, if you're designing the whole thing as an open network, like something can't be locked and also shared with like third parties all over the place, right? So you really want to have this information separation from the start where like, oh, this is like a, like a private-ish or like a limited thing kind of post, and this is a public post, and those are like two different concepts. So that is probably the way we will go, but we're not sure yet for now. So it's something we will be researching like over the coming year or a bit more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, one more question, or is it done? Okay. もう一度拍手お願いします。
はい。ありがとうございました。で、変わりまして、次が、こちらからの登壇、お願いしています。ブルースカイの方を。ユーザーで結構前から参加されている山天さんの登壇になります。すみません、ちょっと準備します。
I also need to find my way here. No.
マイク入ってますかね。はい、大丈夫ですね。はい、ありがとうございます。はい、では、私の方をお話しさせていただきたいと思います。自己紹介スライドとかないですか。山天と申します。まあ、ダンさんとは割と逆で、どちらかというと、実用よりもプロトコルとか、手段の方が好きなタイプで、ブルースカイを割と、人より若干長めに、触れていたので、その辺のちょっとした昔話的な感じになりますが、ブルースカイ、始まってからのお話を、ちょっと私視点でさせていただきたいなというところでございます。ちょっとあれですね、もう現地参加の皆様はこの後の交流が待ち遠しいところかと思いますが、しばらくお付き合いいただければと思います。はい、というところで、2019から2022ですね。2023から皆さんよくご存知だと思いますが、それ以前のatprotoというものが出てくる前のお話になります。で、大体お話ししたことの繰り返しですが、今回お話しすることは、ブルースカイプロジェクトの歴史の話ですよと。中身としては技術的なところよりも、今までの流れのお話をしたいと。で、ブルースカイが始まってから、ベータが始まるぐらいまでだと思ってください。で、ありがとうございます。はい、で、始まってから、2023年の春ぐらいから皆さん、この中の結構な方が、3月とか4月とかから参加されてるかなと思うので、はい、その辺は、その後各自で語り合っていただければなという感じですね。はい。で、歴史の話といいますが、基本的にあくまで一個人というか、特に何か特別な立場ではなくて、ただのやじなので、一応タックから見た印象として受け取ってくださいと。あくまで外野ですし、基本的に公開情報しか知らないです。この後出てくるディスコードとかも参加してないので、特に、新しい情報は出てこないです。はい。ということで、一番ざっくり大まかなタイムラインですね。年ごとに分けていますが、まず2019年の末にブルースカイが生まれますよと。で、この後に、1年ぐらいかけて、今ある、特に分散型と呼ばれる技術ってどんなもんなのという話があります。で、このあたりの調査を終えて、2021年表からあんまり動きが見えないんですが、なんかいろいろ会社設立の準備とかそういうのをしてたみたいですと。で、2022年になって、突如、アトプロトコルとかその原型になる ADX とかいうものが現れますと。で、その頃からブルースカイソーシャルが始まって、2023年から皆さんご存知の通りかなというのが、大雑把な流れになっていて、これそれぞれ説明させていただきたいという感じです。で、まず誕生のところですね。で、最初、ご存知の方多いかと思いますが、ツイッター社のプロジェクトの一環として、ブルースカイは始まりました。始まりはこのジャックのツイートで、今、画面撮っているのは、それをリツイートしたブルースカイ公式アカウントの最初の投稿ですね。これ、ツイッター X 上のブルースカイアカウントになります。で、この時、このジャックのスレッドで、ずらっといろいろ書かれてるんですが、目的としては、分散型、といってもいくつか解釈あるんで、ディセントラライズドと言われる、タイプのソーシャルメディアの、標準形というのはどういうものであるべきかというのを検討しようという話が始まりだったようです。で、そもそもこの時点ではまだプロトコル作ると決まったわけでもなくって、もうこの中のリプライの中でもアクティビティパブあるじゃんみたいな話とかもあったんですが、それに対しても、実際に検討してみて、それがいいと思ったらそれ使うよっていう話をしてますね。で、この時点ではあくまでプロジェクトが立ち上がっただけで、具体的にこれ何やるとか決まってなかった状態です。これが、12月なので、もう2019年も末ですね。当時何を思ってたかっていうと、この時結構話題性もあって、見られてた方も多いかと思いますが、ツイッターがこういうのをやってくるのすごいなと。 ただ、結局この時期、マストドンとかで盛り上がってても、なんかそういう組織って、ちょっと触って、結局、フェードアウトみたいなことも、あったので、なんか形になるかは正直疑ってたというのが、当時の気持ちでした。で、すぐに年が明けまして、2月ぐらいから、有識者の方をあちこちから集めてきて、で、既存の分散型システムについてのレポートを作り始めます。で、これ、レポート自体は公開されてるんですけれども、例えば IPFS とか、SSB とか、このあたりは、ブルースカイも結構関わり深いところですけれども、あとはよく言われるアクティビティパウとか、その他もろもろですね。P2P 系の、プロトコルもいろいろ含まれています。で、これ、ツイッターの内部というよりも、外部から専門家招いて、いろいろ話をしていたようです。具体的に何話してたかとかは見えないところでやってたので、正直2020年、外からはほとんど何も見えなかった状態なんですが、当時そういうことをしていたというのは後から分かった感じですね。で、このコントリビューションズのところ、実際、多分分かる人が見ると、なかなかすごい顔ぶれという感じなんですけれども、マストロン作った人とか、マトリックス、チャットプロトコルですね、作った人とか、すごい豪華なメンツになってまして、で、この一番上に J さんの名前あるように、この頃から、今、ブルースカイ率いている J さんが、結構このリーダー的な感じで進めていたみたいですね。ただ正直、当時は全然そういうの見えてなかったので、あれからどうなったんだろうなと思ってる間に1年が経ったという感じでした。はい。で、さらにもう1年、これも結構表に見えないことが多いんですが、まず、先ほどの2020年の調査内容がレポートとして、年初に公開されます。で、その後あんまり、何か作ったりはないんですけれども、コミュニティを開設して、ディスコードに集まってみんなで喋ったりとか、そのコミュニティはまた独立して別の団体になっていますけれども、そういったことをしているみたいです。で、夏には、J さんがブルースカイのリーダーになったと。で、発表がありまして、で、同時にブルースカイというプロジェクトの公式サイトが開設されます。で、公開情報としてはここまでなんですが、今振り返ってみると、秋頃に会社の登録がされてたりとか、あとは今のatprotoリポジトリの一番最初のコミットがこの2021年末になってたりしますね。なんか裏でいろいろ動いてたみたいです。なんかちょっと話動いた感はあるけど、正直調査レポートが出たぐらいでまだ何も新しいものを作る話にはなってないんだなというのが当時の感想でした。あとはあれですね、ツイッター上のスペースでいろいろプレゼンというかディスカッションとかやってたのは、見ましたね。で、ブルースカイの使命、先ほど言ったように、ウェブサイトが公開されまして、ここで、ブルースカイの方向性がもうちょっと明らかになります。で、ここに書いてありますが、オープン・アド・ディセントラライズド・パブリック・カンバセーションをやりたいと。で、特にこのパブリックっていうところが結構重要で、DM の話の時に公式からも話があったんですけど、非公開コンテンツってブルースカイ的には優先度低めなんですよね。なんでかっていうと、ここにあるようにパブリックカンバセーションがもともとの始まりだからっていうことなんだと思います。で、あとこれとは別に、使命として From Platform to Protocols って分かりやすいスローガンみたいなのも、もうちょっと後から出てきたりして、大体この2本で、押してる感じがしますね。で、実はこの時点でもよく読むと分かるんですが、プロトコルを作るよとはまだ言ってないんですよね。なんか既存の、ディセントラライズドな技術とかを組み合わせて、 新しいプラットフォームを作るよとか、そういうぐらいの話をしていて、プロトコル開発者の募集とかはあったんですが、まだ実際プロトコル作るかどうかは分かってませんでした。が、翌年2022年に、急に話が動き出します。まず、2月の頭にブルースカイが会社として独立しましたよという話が出てきますと。で、すごいなと思っていたら、もう春には、ADX というものが発表されて、はい、すみません。
すいません、ここでダンさんの方がこれから次のところに向かわれるということで、退場となってしまいます。歓談の時間になんか入れなくて、すいません。また次旅行で来られた時に皆様でお迎えできればと思いながらここで送りたいと思います。今日はお越しいただきありがとうございました。ありがとうございました。
じゃあ、はい、では再開させていただきたいと思います。多分すでにちょっと話しすぎている感じはありますが、はい、2022年に ADX というプロトコルの原型が発表されますと。で、同時に Git リポジトリが公開されます。で、その時に同時に、Discord、先ほど言ってたのとは別にマトリックスのサーバーも公開されて、そこでいろいろ技術的な議論をしようみたいなので、募集が開始されますという感じでした。で、秋になって、もう5ヶ月、半年も経たずに、この ADX というものの正式版として、atprotoが発表されます。で、同時にブルースカイソーシャルベータの参加者募集も開始されると。で、実際のところ、このatprotoというものが ADX と呼ばれてた時からそんなに変わってはいないんですが、もう、ちょっとこの後話ありますが、タイミング的に、正式発表に踏み出したという感じでしたね。で、最後のまた非公開の情報なんですが、今振り返ると、最初のポールからの投稿があったのが、それから1ヶ月後で、ブルースカイ、今のブルースカイでも見れる初めての投稿がありましたと。正直、だいぶ急展開で全然ついてきてなかったんですが、GitHub とか読みながら、なんか面白いものできそうだな、まだ全然未完成な感じだけどなと思いながら、待っていましたというような状態でしたというところまでで、atproto発表までたどり着きました。あとはちょっと余談なのでサクッと。2022年、何があったかっていうと、ツイッター買収の話が1年かけてありましたね。で、これがatprotoを発表せざるを得なかった事情という感じになっていまして、実際インタビューというか、記事の中で、本当はもっと時間かけるつもりだったんだけど、プロトタイプでもうリリースせざるを得なかったみたいな話とかをしてたりします。あとは同じく、よくプロトコルで、atprotoと並んで話題になりやすいノストルという、プロトコルがありますけれども、ノストラかな。これの発表があったのが、発表じゃないや、これが話題になったのが同じく2022年の末頃でした。この時にジャックが、出資があったりとか、あと、その辺で、ツイッターから、ブルースカイもそうですけど、一部の、SNS に対して締め出しを、してたりとか、そういうのがあって、この頃にノストル話題になって、ちょうどatprotoも出てた頃なので、なるほどなと2つ読み比べながら、いろいろ興味深く見ていましたと。で、ブルースカイ的には、招待コードの配布会場となってたりもしましたね。で、おまけのおまけですが、その後2023年、どんどん参加者増えていって、4月には、このミートアップの1回目が、 ありましたと。で、春にはサーバー間通信の仕組みも発表されて、で2024になって、ベータが終わって今に至るというようなタイムラインでございましたというところで、まあなんか最初思ってたよりもだいぶ話が大きくなったなというところではございますけれども、まあ、正直私もこんな大勢の前で話すとか全然思ってなかったですしね。はい。で、まあなんか2022年から急に話動き始めたけど、まあその前もいろいろあったんだぞというところで、まあこの資料多分終わって明日にでも、また、アップロードしておきますので、興味ありましたら皆さんご覧くださいというところで、私の発表以上とさせていただきたいと思います。ありがとうございました。
さて、ありがとうございました。少々お待ちください。どれだ？これか？はい、スライドショーモードになりましたね。最初からですね。だいぶ。はい、山手さんの登壇でした。で、アカウントは一応紹介スライド、こちらに用意してあります。よろしければぜひフォローしてください。で、今日多分メインスピーチとかセッション系は一通りになります。で、ここから先ちょっと告知等になります。で、四谷ラボの活動で、なんか分散型 SNS で、先ほどもちょっと話ありました、ノスターと、で、2作目がノスター×ブルースカイ、で、3作目がノスターとブルースカイの、あとコンカレントも含まれてますかね。で、分散型 SNS の本出してます。で、次なんですけど、11月3日の技術書店17、スペースが、個の10だったかな、ちょっとここら辺怪しいんですけど、今、いつもはちょっと公募しながら人を集めて、進んでたんですけど、今回、少しコンパクトに進めてます。で、近いうちに情報出るかと思います。これはお楽しみにしててください。アカウントは四谷ラボのアカウントありまして、428lab.net ですかね。イベントの通知等もさせていただいてます。そのアカウントでフォローください。今回、イベントレポートとしてやってる最中の写真、どんどんそのアカウントの方から投稿させていただいてます。で、これまた予告ですね。次回、ミートアップの開催地が決まっています。で、まだ公開してないです。募集もうそろそろ始めるかなと思ってて、これも四谷ラボのアカウントで告知します。場所福岡です。で、日時はほぼ1ヶ月後ぐらいですかね、11月の16日、13時から、昼間ですかね、土曜日だったかな、やるかなと思います。場所は天神のエンジニアカフェさんという場所でやります。これもコンパスの方で、募集開始する予定です。多分この QR コードは使えるのかちょっとわからないです。またスライドとか告知をお待ちください。で、これからだいぶお待たせしてしまってすいません。観覧タイムに移らせていただきたいと思いますが、その前になんか一言紹介したい人がいるらしいので、こちらに来ていただきましょうか。はい。ちょっとさっきはね、後でって言ってたけど、その前にか。配信の方は、なし。みたいですね。配信したらダメっぽい。はい、ということで、一応メインセッションすべて終了となりますので、配信の方ここで終了させていただきます。配信ご覧の皆様、長い時間ありがとうございました。また次のイベントでお会いしましょう。